This is the second webinar in the series. First took place in February and dealt with introduction to sponge measures. If you didn't have time to attend then, it's already available on the webpage and you are welcome to see it. However, in September, we plan another one regarding the modeling of sponge measures, and you are also welcome to join us then. Today's topic is the measurements of sponge measures, monitoring with insights from the field. The first speaker will be Alejandro Dussaillant, a senior hydrologist working with natural processes across the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. He leads SpongeScapes works on monitoring and will share his experience and examples on nature-based solutions for floods and droughts in fluvial and agricultural landscapes. The second speaker who will join us is Giannis Alexiou, a nature-based solutions associate at Worldwide Fund Greece. In SpongeScapes, WWF Greece is coordinating actions for the Greek case study in Paros Island. Today, Giannis will share his insights from the traditional stone check dams as a sponge measure to reduce drought risk and enhance biodiversity. Finally, I will give you a brief overview of the potential fun that you might have when working in the field and taking the measurements and performing the monitoring. So for introduction, I believe this is it. And I will invite Alejandro to take the floor.
Thank you, Katarina. Hi all, thank you for being here. Let me share my screen. And then let me know when you see the full screen. Okay, so let me arrange this a little bit. Okay. So how do sponge measures work? Some monitoring and particular insights from our experience in the field and in this project and others. So let me see, is it changing? Yes. So very quickly, just to mention that a few aspects of SpongeScapes. Particularly, I want to remind that the sponge measures, as we see in this project, are those that absorb, store, and slowly release water. And I will come back to that. And I will also come back to the solutions that improve the sponge functioning in soil, groundwater, and surface water landscapes. And just to remind you, we have 14 case studies across 4 different climatic zones in Europe. And a key aspect of learning from these case studies is to have an adequate monitoring. So why monitor? Well, in general, as the guru of management, Peter Drucker, said many years ago, if you don't measure it, you cannot manage it. And actually, if you don't monitor, then you cannot have a baseline before you implement the measures so as to compare it with. You cannot assess performance and benefits. And particularly interesting, because we always talk about benefits, but we also need to understand the trade-offs and any unintended consequences. And without monitoring, we would never know, or we would know too late. So it's also kind of an early warning tool. And also, particularly for nature-based solutions, but any kind of measure needs maintenance. The thing with nature-based solutions is that it is natural, so it has several possible trajectories, and we don't monitor, we won't understand what that trajectory is going to be. So the idea is to design the monitoring according, first of all, to what the original aims of the measures were, but also what do you want as a benefit a longer term. And that will illustrate, or at least illuminate, what kind of indicators, these famous key performance indicators, you need to monitor before it's implemented, and during implementation, and after implementation, as long as you can. So what do I mean by indicators that are representative? And this is not myself, this is a summary of 3 or 4 key aspects that all good indicators should have. They should be measurable and scientifically credible, so others can say, yes, that is a reasonable indicator. They need to be comparable, because it's not only about your site, but actually collective learning about sites that are similar but in different contexts of climate, of geography. So if we have similar indicators, then we can collectively assess performance in those different contexts and compare and learn. They need to be replicable and scalable, so you can use them at different spatial scales, and you can replicate in other places. And last but not least, this is very important, they have to be meaningful to all key stakeholders. So it's not only technical aspect, but also how well that indicator communicates with stakeholders according to their key objectives. So in SpongeScapes, and we are following a similar process in SpongeWorks, we co-developed the indicators. I'm going to talk mostly about water retention indicators, this sponge function, but you could think about this also for the other benefits, water quality, biodiversity, habitat, socioeconomics, etc. So we had the guidance first of what is the sponge function, the water retention aspect. That's where we started with, and we combined basically 3 avenues. Of course, we went through literature and saw what others had been doing worldwide, but of course, with a deeper focus in Europe. We did through a expert process understanding, we did ourselves and our colleagues in our institutions, but also we interacted with the local context of the 14 case studies and the 6 European ecoregions, so as to be able to incorporate what indicators, water retention indicators, were important for those measures. And in combination, then we had that hierarchy based on the key processes, how easy it was to measure or estimate the indicator, and hopefully have prioritization depending on how transversal to all case studies these indicators were, so as to be able to pool the information from all case studies in a meaningful way. And to aid that, we classified our case studies. Classification usually is done so as to help understand a more complex system, right? So we have 14 case studies. We divided them in 3 types. So our typology is first those measures that are mostly surface water. For example, floodplain reconnection, and I will give an example later on. Those that are focused mostly in surface groundwater interaction, and actually Giannis is going to talk about one of them later. And the third category, the soil vegetation type or system, where I'm also going to talk about the example of regenerative agricultural practices. So our 14 case studies, and I'm not going to read this, are more or less well distributed between these 3 typologies. And with that, we created a matrix of indicators going down this table. I'm not going to go into the detail, but just to show you that we went through a very thorough process and the case studies across and looking at the different colors are the different typologies. So blue is surface water level, green and brown are soil and vegetation, and these over here are groundwater. Looking at what key indicators were important for each of them, and then looking for the across similarity. But the main thing we came down to was that one main aspect or key aspect of water retention is really the ability to store water and slowly release. So again, back to that idea of the sponge being able to absorb, store, but also release. Because if you think of a flood, and these are sponge measures for floods and droughts, if you think for a flood, no matter how much storage you have, for example, in a wetland, if it's filled up in a storm and it doesn't drain to a certain level of capacity before the next storm, then that storage is not very useful from a sponge function point of view. It's not dynamic storage. We need dynamic storage. So it's storage, but also release. And you can think of similar examples for soil and other systems. So just to go through a couple of examples where we've been doing monitoring within this project and actually extending more longer term experiences. The first one is a fluvial landscape. It's the Little Stock Brook Natural Flood Management Project that was delivered between 2016 and 2021. It was monitored partly by us, but actually a partnership from 2018 to 2022, and then SpongeScapes took over in 2023 in a subset of this very large project, which includes about several hectares of different kinds of measures, which include, like in the picture, this is the Little Stock Brook going downstream. It's a typically ditched agricultural landscape stream. Field corner bands, where basically you create a depression. Usually the farmer with his own machinery, that's the idea, creates this berm that actually captures surface runoff from the agricultural field, but also the overflow from woody leaky dams that are trying to backwater water in the stream. Riparian woodland, retention ponds too. This project was motivated because of big floods occurring in 2007 across the UK, in particular in a village downstream of this site. And the idea of SpongeScapes is, well, let's dig deeper on how much flood mitigation is provided by these individual and combined measures, how these measures will evolve, and what are the co-benefits, particularly two that we're interested in aquatic biodiversity and sediment capture. So what was our design, monitoring design for SpongeScapes in this site? Well, first, it's very obvious that the key aspect of storage among all these measures is the surface water storage. There's not much infiltration and groundwater. It's mostly surface storage in the bunds, in the ponds, in the floodplain. So we measure water levels in those areas with telemetered sensors that go into a platform. These are low-cost telemeter water level sensors that actually tell us when the battery goes down, and we can go and maintain the sensors in the field. About 500 euros all combined between the structure, the small sensor, the small solar panel, the batteries, and the telemetering. Of course, we need to gauge in the stream so as to have that relationship between the water level and the flow. And we have to do bathymetric surveys to understand what is the storage available, for example, in the bands and how it changes year to year because of sedimentation. We also are monitoring soil moisture with ground sensors, and we're combining that with remote sensing. And we are doing aquatic macroinvertebrate and macrophyte surveys. Just to show more or less what is the idea, there's a woody leaky dam here, and in this diagram is this one here. It creates a backwater effect, overflows, there's overbank flow that goes into this field corner band that also receives field runoff. We are monitoring the water level and the change of storage volume because of sedimentation in this band. You can see there's a population already of macrophytes there, and what is going on with the drainage going back to the stream. So how quickly or not these systems drain. I don't have the picture here, but actually this band on the other side of the stream got full in Storm Bert in November last year, and it drained in a couple of days. And these are just an example, a screen capture of what the telemeter sensor is giving us. Some issues that we had to manage in the field, just a selection. You install the sensors and you hope for the best, but we didn't need to relocate one because of growth of vegetation during the summer, and therefore less charge from the solar panel to the battery. So the good thing about these small sensors is that it takes quite little effort to move them around. Of course, things that others might have experienced, depending on farm operations, your soil moisture sensors might need to might be impacted, and you also need to think about carefully with the farmer what is a long-term location that will give you a sustainable measure for that longer term that you need. And the collaboration is very important. This is a project that was spearheaded actually by an NGO, Wild Oxfordshire, and there's many ways where we are looking to collaborate to, for example, the monitoring of biodiversity, and with other researchers, which, for example, recently did a terrestrial laser scanner survey of the woody leaky dam. That because it's woody, it's actually deteriorating, and after 5 years, it's already probably needing some maintenance. So to understand that deterioration rate is very important to maintain these systems in the longer term. And we're also doing some experiments, proof of concepts with drones and with different ways of measure flow, including an automatic dilution system. The other big example I wanted to show is for agricultural practices. Here we also piggybacked on another natural flood management project funded by the Natural Environment Research Council in the UK the last few years, looking for evidence of how these measures, NFM particularly, could improve or reduce flood risk in communities. We selected some of the sites of this very large project, particularly a few of regenerative agricultural practices that included buffer strips, cover crops, and controlled traffic, versus one site that is more traditional, rotational crops, and also some wooded versus grassland sites. one of the main issues here, because of the type of soil, is the waterlogging in the fields, which of course affects farmers, but also that creates runoff and all the consequences downslope and downstream. And one of the major co-benefits we're studying is the soil organic matter to later connect to carbon sequestration, but also very important for soil fertility. And one thing that is very important for the key stakeholder here, which is the farmer, is actually having a soil that is as fertile as possible for a more productive crop. So questions here are how much water can the soil hold, and we're trying to use innovative, also here, innovative monitoring, combining low cost with golden standard methods. And over here on the right is just an example of the sampling sites of one of the field. We're trying to combine similar protocol as landwise in field where the crops are, with traffic where the machinery goes through, and what happens at the border of the field where there's no traffic at all, and you could say it's more or less a wild border. So what was the design here? Where the main aspect is soil water storage, particularly in the root zone, but the drainage of that root zone is the percolation. So we're measuring both. In one way, one aspect, the first aspect through bulk density sampling and analysis to estimate porosity, and measuring the field with Guelph parameters. And in this picture, we're measuring percolation at 25 and 45 centimeters depth, so as to estimate that percolation under the root zone. We're combining with low-cost soil moisture sensors, with a golden standard of cosmic ray neutron sensors, Cosmos UK kit, which is quite expensive, but the advantage of CRNS is that it gives you, instead of a point measurement, you get a 200-meter diameter measurement or estimate of soil moisture, which can be compared to what you get from drones and satellites. So it's very useful. And we are doing soil surveys and sampling and measurements in the field every time the farmer goes into the field and does a big management. So either harvesting, planting, or mulching, or something that will change the characteristics of the soil, so we can understand how these properties change, the sponge function change, not only year to year, but season to season, and management to management, and also better inform models that try to capture this. Some aspects that we had to deal with, well, representativeness is a big issue. How you make sure that the locations you need, the locations you select, are representative of the wider field and the conditions. And that needs a lot of experience, and luckily we have very good soil hydrologists that we discuss it within CH, but also across Europe and worldwide. You have to be very careful to avoid biases, and one example is measuring the saturated hydraulic conductivity and percolation rates and infiltration rates, because depending on what method you use and how you use it, you can get results that can be representative or biased or not. Just to give you an example, infiltration and percolation can vary a lot, even if you move a few centimeters away from your sampling point. So how to combine point measurements to more aerial estimates of what is infiltration and percolation is a big issue. I'm not going to go into the technical detail here, but I thought it was good to mention that. Yeah, so there's some pictures there of what we're using, the Cosmos station, the multispectral and thermal imaging drones, the TDR field scouts, etc. Some preliminary results, and I think I'm almost finished here. We looked at longer-term data sets. So we have the The benefit in the UK that we have some stations, be it the Cosmos UK soil moisture or the Ediflux towers from the Assist and UKscape and NC national capability. And we looked at long-term soil moisture measurements at different depths at different sites. And just to give you one example of this, I think it's about 8 years, 9 years, perhaps 10 years record. We found that the maximum amount of soil moisture that the soil could capture had increased significantly in this site. And this is important because an extra 5%, like here, of uh, soil water volume storage capacity in a 1 meter deep soil in a 1 hectare is actually 500 cubic meters extra of storage. So this is a very important indicator. And on the right, something just coming up recently on soil organic matter. This is the topsoil, so 0 to 5 centimeters. The results in 2021 from Landwise project NFM, and our results in SpongeScapes about a 2% increase in soil organic matter from 5 to 7 in only 3 years. That is a big, big plus. So we're looking to see if this is actually something that repeats itself across other sites. So with that, thank you for your attention. Yeah, I'll see you in questions. I think I did 20 minutes, right?
Thanks, Alejandro. Giannis, it's your turn now, please.
Sure, let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. So hello everyone, my name is Giannis Alexiou. I'm a Nature-Based Solutions Associate at WWF Greece. And today I will present to you an example of a sponge measure, the traditional stone check dams in ephemeral streams. And I will give you some information and insights from our case study in Paros Island. To start with, some brief information about Paros. Paros is an island of the Cyclades Islands. It is located at the heart of the Aegean Sea. And similar to other islands nearby, it faces water challenges such as drought risk and flood risk. Also, the increased touristic development during the last years are reflected on the water consumption, as you can see in the graph on the right side of the screen. Water consumption nowadays is nearly doubled as it was 15 years ago, while annual precipitation is very low most of the times, and in many cases it's less than 300 millimeters per year. So what's the sponge measure we're implementing here? It's the traditional stone check dams in ephemeral streams. Examples of this structure, you can see them on the right side of the screen. And this is a really traditional practice that has been implemented in the Mediterranean regions for hundreds of years for water management purposes. These structures are really low in height. In many cases, they are less than half a meter tall. There are piles of stones with no connecting material, and they serve a triple goal. The main thing they do is that they slow the flow of water. And this is very important because they act as a block for floods. Then, by slowing the flow of water, they manage to create and store water behind them in these small temporary ponds. And these ponds are very important in the dry and arid Mediterranean summers. that are characterized in Greek islands. And these serve as an oasis for local fauna and flora to be enhanced locally. Finally, all this water that is stored in these ponds leads to an increased water infiltration and thus recharges the aquifer. In our case study in Paros Island, our main goals is to recharge the aquifer and also enhance biodiversity there. There have been similar projects like this in Greek islands. It all started during the early 90s in Naxos Island, in the village of Apiranthos, where 66 structures were constructed mainly for erosion control and aquifer recharge. Then some years ago, during the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a boom of case studies with traditional stone check dams in Kythira, Paros, and Ios Islands. Now a similar project is in action in Sifnos Island with 120 structures, and another one in Evia Island will be implemented in the following year. So here is our timeline in Paros. It all started in 2021. We managed to launch a biodiversity monitoring 1 year before the construction of the check dams, which happened in 2022. Then we constructed 34 structures across 1.3 kilometers in Kavugapotamo stream, which is an ephemeral stream in Paros. And also we did some post-construction biodiversity monitoring. 2023 was a very important year for this project because SpongeScapes started. So this gave us the chance to continue with the engagement there and also to continue with the monitoring the effect of check dams on water and biodiversity, which we currently do. This year, we will also start a monitoring plan to monitor surface water. And by the end of SpongeScapes project, in 2 years from now, we will have a synthesis of our results showing what are the effects of these check dams to surface water and biodiversity. Now, some information about the construction. Here are some photos from Kavugapotamos some years ago. Of course, the construction there was made possible with the collaboration with our partners then, Medina, the Paros Water Supply and Sewage Company, Municipality of Paros, and the Hellenic Institute of Speleological Research. But also for that purpose, we collaborated with national and local stakeholders, Boulouki, Archilochos, and Paros Festival. Now some information about the construction phase. This was in Paros, but these are also general guidelines that anyone can use to build such check dams in other areas. First of all, we do not use any connecting material such as concrete. It's literally small piles of stones. These are really cost effective in relation to other measures. Each structure costs 250 to 500 euros, so they're really cheap. Also, these structures are placed in ephemeral streams and not in rivers of continuous flow. And in this way, these structures have no impact on the connectivity of biodiversity. Also, it's really important to keep in mind that the location when someone wants to construct these needs to be accessible and needs to have a high availability in stones. So there are a lot of stones there found naturally to build these small structures. The focus should be on impermeable and semi-permeable geology. And also, someone needs to keep in mind other points of interest nearby that might influence negatively or positively these constructions, such as wells, archaeological sites, or areas of agriculture. And now here is a brief overview of our monitoring plan. This can be divided in two categories: monitoring of surface water and monitoring of biodiversity. About surface water, we are now developing this monitoring plan. It will be divided in three different topics: meteorological data that we're going to collect from the local station in Paros Island, water storage, which is something that we can find through LiDAR connected in a drone, and also the water level. And this is information that we will collect through a combination of instruments in the field that will measure water level in real time, and also cameras. Now, about biodiversity, we use two different kinds of indicators. One has to do with vegetation, and we do that using satellite images so as to create the NDVI vegetation index and see these differences. And also, we use fauna biotic indicators. For this case study, we use amphibians, crabs, and ground invertebrates, which are all organisms that are important and relevant to the specific case study. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the synthesis of our results will be complete by the end of the project. However, we have some preliminary results that I can share with you. About biodiversity, it's important to mention that we detected crabs there after several years. This is something important because Kavropotamos, the name of the stream, literally in Greek means the river of crabs. Lots of them were found there in the past, and we now managed to detect again individuals after several years. Also, about biodiversity, we noticed that the NDVI was enhanced or stayed more or less stable from 2019 to 2023, even though there was a very large decrease in precipitation at the same time at the rate of 57%. Now, about water and groundwater. So far, we have only anecdotal data from the field. Many locals have observed that an increase in surface water stored and retained by the check dams, even many days after precipitation, after rainfall. And finally, resistance to floods. There was a pretty severe flood event a few months ago at the end of March, and we were happy to see that these check dams remained intact after this flood event, even though it resulted in many catastrophes in the island. So these are our preliminary results, and I believe that these are an indication of how such sponge measures, such as these traditional stone check dams, can be a practical and efficient tool for climate adaptation. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions later.
Great, thank you. So again, if you have any questions, just write them in the chat. If we won't have time to answer them during the webinar, they will be all answered and published on the project webpage. So to continue, I have a presentation about the measurements that we do in Ljubljana. So in Ljubljana, we have a research plot. It's the small urban park, and it was established before the SpongeScapes project. Now the focus here is on the role of trees in regulating or retaining the water and their function in the context of sponge measures. Maybe before I should mention that at University of Ljubljana, Chair of Hydrology and Hydraulic Engineering, we have quite an extensive experience in setting up different research plots, even in bigger catchments or landscapes. There were multiple research catchments which are already discontinued, and others are added. So in the SpongeScapes project, we do measurements on this plot presented here, where we have the grassy area and the area covered with trees, where we can monitor the influence of rainfall interception process. In addition to rainfall, truefall, and stem flow, growth and transpiration of trees, we also monitor the soil moisture in 3 depths on 3 locations. This is just to give you an insight into our work and experience. However, the fun on the field begins there. I'm not sure if you all know this equipment. This is sorry, I just have to check before I continue. Do you see the whole presentation or just the PowerPoint? No, okay, because I see a PowerPoint and I'm not sure what do you see. So here on the picture is a classic tipping bucket rain gauge, quite a standard equipment to measure rainfall. Maybe you already noticed that there's something wrong with this. Sorry. I'm not sure how I will. I have animations, so just not, please, if you'll be able to see the next picture or you get the next slide.
Katarina, just
Yeah.
your presentation is not in full screen mode. Maybe that's why we don't see.
Yeah, that's what okay, now it will works. Okay, great. Yeah, because of double screens.
Yeah,
sorry.
perfect.
Okay, so here you can get a bit of more insights into what happened with this rainfall gauge. Here in the background, you can see the hunting lodge. So obviously, hunters did their job and used this rain gauge as a target for shooting. And that's how the rain gauge got destroyed. And this is quite often to see on the field, because there is a lot of time that people just don't know what this is doing there. We had situations where people use this rainfall gauge as an ashtray, and also situations when they just use some solar panels and take them home. Or there are also situations, as Alejandro mentioned before, that people just don't know what this is and have, or maybe they just don't want these things to be there, and they just ruin the equipment on purpose. This is another aspect. Another thing that we have to keep in mind when doing monitoring is that it will be in the nature, right? So in nature, we have a lot of visitors that maybe we don't want them to be there. So this might be the ant colonies, some worms, or even some bigger animals getting their homes in our measurement equipments. Or we also had situations of angry cows trampling the electrical cables because they thought they were snakes. So it's very important to go out there and check the equipment. With the development and establishment of new sensors and new monitoring systems, and also the data clouds, which are very popular right now, we think that many things might get easier, that maybe the field visits won't be necessary as often as before. And here on the figure, you can see the example of data cloud for our research plot that I showed at the beginning. All the sensors are connected, and we can get real-time data and check if all the sensors are working properly, and it can be done from office or from home. And all the issues and misfunctioning can be observed very quickly. However, all of these systems, even though I think they are quite great, we should keep in mind that they are very expensive. They have to be paid for every year, and without granted funding, it's not easier to keep up with such a monitoring for a long time. However, we already heard that long-time monitoring is very important to see if there's any effect of sponge measures that were actually implemented. Additionally, the systems on their own cannot make up for any failure in the field, so you still have to go out there and do all the work. So, as I would conclude, is that field work is actually a lot of fun if you are a person that likes it. It is also very, very important. Setting up the monitoring system is essential when introducing sponge measures, and this should be planned alongside the construction of the measure itself. However, advanced devices and systems, you have to keep in mind that maintenance will be required, and having a person who sees the fun in the field work and in the monitoring, it is priceless to have someone like that. And it is actually the only thing that will make your monitoring effective and long-lasting. This is just maybe a take-home message after everything you heard today. Before we finish with the presentations, I would just like to invite you, if you are involved in any case study, you are welcome to contribute to the Nature Water Return Navarone webpage. You can see here Nature Water Retention Measures webpage, where many of the case studies are collected. It is shared knowledge platform with international examples. Here you can find you can just scan the link, or you can find it on the project's webpage. Now I would like to thank you all for your attention and start the Q&A session.
So I will take over the Q&A session. Thank you all who asked already your questions in the chat. Please do others too. We still have some time, and we will go chronologically, right? Oh. I'm sorry, can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I will repeat that if some of you has another question that wasn't asked already in the chat, please write it in the chat and we will try to do our best to answer it. So we will go chronologically how the questions were asked in the chat. So the first question was asked by Rudi Bösinger for Alejandro. What about the connectivity for fish and other species if you build dams in river creeks? Because for him, this doesn't seem to be a very smart nature-based solution. And I think Alejandro already answered and also others, but I will ask Alejandro just to shortly recap the answer for those who didn't read the chat during the presentations of other speakers. Please, Alejandro.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And I think Rudy, I hope I pronounced that correctly, it's up to a point in the sense that, yes, it's important that these barriers or dams are leaky and consider, for example, fish passage or any kind of migratory species in that location. But that is exactly the idea of these barriers or dams, that they are leaky in the matter that they're only activated for very large flows and reconnecting floodplain that used to be connected. I mean, in the system I showed, those are agricultural landscapes where streams were ditched because the farmer needed to get the water out as quickly as possible. And we are actually going back to a more natural flow regime. But I think he's on something, in the sense that we need to be very careful about understanding what is the natural flow regime and how has it been impacted in the last decades, because perhaps we can never go back to that natural flow regime, but at least not impact it further.
Thank you. The next question was by Alice, and she asked how quickly are the fill bunds filling up with sediments or debris, and do they need to be maintained? There is a sub-question about the maintenance costs. This is also similar to the question of Catherine, who is also asking about the costs, about the initial investment and the maintenance. Can you give us some overview?
So, yeah, very good questions. I did point out a few things in the chat, but on the field corner bands or any other kind of runoff attenuation feature that might fill up with sediment, it depends on the context. So, for example, the idea is that these measures can be built by the same farmer with their own equipment. These are not big structures or very complex technically to build. And depending on what happens with that feature, for example, there's bands that don't get colonized by vegetation, and those might trap sediment that actually for the farmer might be interesting to dig up and re-put into their fields because they tend to be quite high nutrient status or content. But there might be other features like the one I was showing with the macrophytes, where you actually have created a new ecosystem and you don't want to dredge it. You want to keep it there. So perhaps that one will fill up, and then we will need to see what needs to be done, whether with the other bands and the rest of the system it's enough, or we need to perhaps create a new band in a new corner of field. On cost, so the overall NFM project, I think it was about around £200,000. But I shared a graph from the report showing the estimate of the return. The return actually on flood risk reduction wasn't great. Or the estimate about 100,000, so about half of the cost. But actually, other benefits are much larger, in the order of hundreds of thousands, and you can see the details there. I'm not going to go and mention those, but I think this is a key aspect. Sometimes you install these features for water retention, and actually the benefits are much larger in other areas like biodiversity, amenity, well-being, water quality, etc. So that's important to take into account.
Thank you. And the last question for you, Alejandro, is from Daniela. If you also look at the state of the plant above and below the soil, so for example, the harvest size and value before and after the measures were taken.
Just very quick, I also answer in text, but we don't have enough resources to do everything. So we do try to monitor the root depth, and we're trying to estimate the impact of macroporosity. But we do talk to the farmers, and we do get information, and we recently did a questionnaire with them, and we're going to repeat it before the end of the project.
Thank you. So we are going to the second speaker. So Giannis, if you can answer to Panos, what was the impact of the recent floods in Paros to the stone weirs?
Hi, Panos. So, as I mentioned in the presentation, and to all of you that don't know about it, there's been a severe flood event in Paros in March. This caused many catastrophes in the island, especially in a city in part of the island. When the flood event was over and we managed to visit the field and the study area in person, we saw that there was no impact of the floods on the structures. They were intact. And I believe that this is an indication of how such measures, sponge measures, and especially these traditional stone check dams that have been practiced for hundreds of years in Mediterranean islands. This can be a valuable tool that is adapted to the current climatic conditions, and it can be used effectively against water-related events such as floods and drought.
Thank you. The second question is related to groundwater impact. If you monitor some impact on groundwater, since groundwater bodies are the main water sources in Cyclades Islands. You mentioned something already in your presentation, but please can you answer?
So the issue with that is that there are no wells nearby, so we can monitor groundwater. And at the same time, this monitoring plan is set in place years after these structures were constructed. So even if there was a way, there would be no way to make a contrast between what was the situation before and what is it now. What we want to do is to focus on surface water because indirectly you can get results from the surface water to groundwater. And in any case, we have visited the field with geologists who have confirmed that the stream has geological structures, schistosities, that show that in fact surface water is leaded to groundwater. So we do in fact have a qualitative support for that.
Thank you. And the next question is more technical. So what type of EO products are you using to obtain NDVI? And what is the spatial resolution? Can you give some information about this?
Yeah, sure. So for more technical information, we used PlanetScope satellite images at 3 meters resolution. What we did is that we calculated NDVI by making a 3-meter buffer zone around the stations and then take points there and form an average. And this is how we estimated the NDVI per station.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. We will have to close up because the time is up. I would just like to answer to another question that was already given in the chat, and Alejandro kindly answered already about the monitoring if it is not very close to the building where you are positioned. Of course, we have a very big luck that this our urban park is near to our building, and this is more like a test where we can play with many measurements which are close, and we can go and fix everything almost in a moment. However, this is usually very rare, and we also were engaged in many monitorings around places which are very hard to reach, and usually you cannot drive there. You have to walk for an hour or so, or you have to have special cars, of course. So in this case, it is really important to have people who are there just to maintain all these things. Usually this might be some PhD students or some researchers who work just on the monitoring. It's really helpful to have all the data connected to the cloud, so you can see the situation of the batteries and you can plan your field trips to these places accordingly. However, it's really up to the funding and up to your plan how to do everything. And in this case, it's not necessary to monitor everything. It's really important to plan this smartly. And in this case, maybe look for some help from the people who have experience and who can give you an insights on what to measure and which sensors which are more robust that this measurement campaigns will be successful, because at the end, this is all that we are looking for. So thank you all for joining us today. All the remaining questions will be answered and published with the recording of today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. And before you log out, I hope Chloe was able to prepare a short survey, just 2 clicks, to give us the feedback so that for the next webinars, we may prepare better. Thank you all and have a nice day.